Hello and welcome everyone to this Euronews debate here in Zurich on digital identification. Many of us use it every day in work and play and business. It's a natural thing, but for many people there are also concerns, and that's what we want to talk about today as well. Security, consumer protection, privacy, data protection. So we want to address those concerns. This is developing even more in the European Union and here in Switzerland as well. In the EU, there's a digital identity wallet that has to be across the EU 27 by the end of next year in every country. And here in Switzerland, it's a hot topic because they're starting with a kind of a pilot project this year, and there will be a vote, a referendum, later this year on digital identity. So we want to hear feedback on that as well. And feedback from our audience here, our special audience here in Zurich, and greetings also to all of those who are connected here and on streaming. I'm Chris Burns, and with us is Daniel Zeubeli, President of DIDAS, Digital Identity and Data Sovereignty Association. You're a think tank for a privacy-first and a frictionless digital future. You're also on the board of the Verifiable Trade Foundation, supporting open and verifiable digital framework for the future of trade. Got that right?
Absolutely.
That was good? Okay, good. And then Agnieszka Wyszynska-Schulz.
Perfect.
Which I got that great. I practice in the shower. You're Vice President of Regulatory Product and ESG, that's Environmental, Social, and Governance Policy at Philip Morris International, including you said 20 years in Poland?
Over 20 years at PMI, so
wow.
I studied as a child. So.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess so, because, okay, won't go into that. Karim Nemr, Chief Business Officer of PXL Vision. You help companies automate their digital customer onboarding. You're also a guest lecturer at the University of Saint-Gallen on entrepreneurship. Welcome. Welcome.
Very much. Nice to be here.
Yeah, great to see you all. Let's start with the state of play. What is the situation now? How has it evolved since COVID? During COVID-19, a lot of us were shoved and pushed into the digital era. We had no choice. We had to make it work. There was no other way. And that is one reason why digital identity has become so important. Digital IDs have facilitated getting on with life. But of course, we want to check the downsides as well, or the concerns. The impact of AI, what it means for the business sector in this digital revolution. Let's get a state of play first from Daniel. These digital IDs, can you give us a state of play at the moment?
Absolutely. So Switzerland obviously has had a public vote on the EID before.
Yeah, and it failed, 64% against.
Absolutely, and basically
why?
there were key arguments against it, which kind of put in the center why it is so centralized on one side, but also and mainly why the private sector is involved in the process of issuing these identities. Yeah. And so it was turned down because also of privacy concerns. There were ways of tracking people across the web, and basically we don't want that. Okay. Aligned with Swiss values, we don't want that.
Since then, how did you maybe get it right so that people approve it this time?
So I think the team that brought the current framework together has been extremely open and has developed a participatory process of involving various stakeholders across private sector, citizen organizations, but also various innovators. And they also look at the European framework, they look at the framework that is happening in Canada, what Bhutan is doing. So many states around the globe provide the ability to learn and continuously improve the thought process on how these systems should be designed.
Maybe it's also how you shop it to the public, how you communicate it. And isn't this seen as, if it's done right, it should be empowerment, shouldn't it?
It should be empowerment for individuals like us to sovereignly and self-determined, to move self-determined through the digital space and to stay in control. And that's one of the key aspects. Besides privacy by design and the data minimization principles to ensure that everyone has control over their data and who they share it with and in what context.
Right, right. Let me move to Agnieszka because for any business, I think it means cost efficiency, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think our business is also very particular because we are a very highly regulated industry and we sell our products only to legal age consumers. So obviously we want to make sure that our products end up in the hands of the right people, so adults basically. And obviously EID can absolutely help to make this age verification process robust enough. It can help to also mitigate the risk of human error in checking the age.
Right.
It definitely helps us as the company when we have direct contact with our consumers, but also all the business partners that work with us that are involved in the sales of our products, so tobacco and nicotine-containing products. So obviously this is also legal liability and the compliance, and this is absolutely the solution that helps us to address it in a as robust as possible manner.
How does it help you save money? How does it improve the bottom line?
Look, it's the time that we spend on the verification, identification of our consumers, but also on our customers in terms of the business transactions that we do as well. So it's time, it's money, it's efficiency. So there are only the benefits. And obviously, I think you mentioned also the European digital identity wallet. So the moment when these systems are interoperable, obviously this helps us a lot also in terms of cross-border transactions, business transactions. So absolutely there are various aspects that bring the benefit for us.
Okay. Karim, on the Swiss ID, can we take a look at that a little bit more? What's the status of it now? How is the tryout? Because I think it started in March.
Yeah.
How is that working now? What's the take-up among the public?
So I mean, take-up is obviously not great yet, but it's just a sandbox or a pilot basically. There is a wallet, it's called Swiyu, which you can download and try. And there's open interfaces where you as a business you can do proof of concept with some basic, let's say, functionalities and use cases. But yeah, key will be the adoption at the end of the day. So first, let's hope that we get a positive vote in September. But I'm confident there because all the points which were criticized in 2011 were basically taken on. But if we look at the EID, what people see is the wallet, right? At the end of the day, from that perspective, it's nothing else than your physical identification document, but digital. But what's under hood is actually what makes it special. So there's an entire trust infrastructure that is being built, which allows you then to enrich your EID, because my identity is not just what I have on my passport, but it's also my degrees, you know, my journalist pass, and so on. And you want to be able to choose when you share this information with whom, and the other party needs to be able to trust that, and that needs an entire infrastructure.
Okay, we're going to get to trust a little bit later, but the thing is that there's also artificial intelligence as a threat to IDs, digital IDs. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. I mean, the world is going pretty much crazy right now. You know, I mean, COVID was one driver. Now we have AI, and again, so it's a lot of manual effort to verify transactions in the digital world to bring that trust again.
How much should I be worried about identity theft when it comes to my digital ID? I have an app, and I use it sometimes several times a day. How dangerous is that?
It's very dangerous, right?
In what way?
I mean,
because you got to reassure me. You got to reassure the public out there who's going to vote.
I can't. No, panic everyone. No, I mean the EID will bring a certain level of assurance because it's bound to your device. You're authenticated with your biometrics to access it, and so on. So the issuance is done in a very secure way.
So it's airtight, watertight, but
nothing is 100%, right? But the big but is not everyone will have an EID, not everyone will have it from day one. There's still other methods, you know, phishing, social engineering, and so on, to get access to your data, to access your accounts, and so on. We have now with AI, it has become, in general, independent of an EID or whatever, it has become so easy to generate fake documents fake faces,
Yeah.
deep fakes. So this is where we are developing new technology to detect those, independent of an infrastructure or a wallet or an app that's being used. Because nowadays you don't know, we could be deep fakes now, streaming through Euronews,
Yeah.
right? No one
We are
knows.
the avatars.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
except the people here in the
Careful what
room.
you
They
watch.
know. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's exactly
Yeah.
the reason why we have to build that fortress for individuals to actually stay in control of the data
Right.
that we are able to share in the digital world. So that wallet that Karim spoke about is that digital fortress that we build for every single one in Switzerland
Yeah.
in a way that preserves privacy.
Got
And
it.
when you speak about consumer identification, I think it even goes beyond. It's super important that we can verify certain attributes like the plus 18, plus 16 attribute, but that at the same time we don't give up our privacy information.
Yeah.
So Switzerland actually works very hard in ensuring unlinkability of you moving across the web, even through technical identifiers.
So you can you can decide how much information you convey. in
You
that.
can decide based on the transaction how much information you convey, and also the privacy by design and privacy by default principles ensure that you cannot be tracked. You know, in certain cases you might reveal your name, but in certain cases you might just reveal plus 18.
Yes.
But there are digital technical identifiers sent with the data of that transaction.
Right.
And Switzerland makes sure that even those technical identifiers cannot be tracked from one service to the other.
And look,
that's
just
crucially important.
if I may add on top of what Daniel said, I think it's very important also for us as a business because we need to handle certain type of the data that consumer is sharing with us. So obviously, the more safeguards that we are talking about, the better for us as well, because this ensures the compliance on our side as the business operator. So it's critical.
So that involves cybersecurity too, to make sure you don't get hacked.
Yes,
And some people get
that
hacked.
nothing happens. There is no theft of identity. So it's really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we move on to part two of this, of consumer protection, security, privacy? We're talking a little bit about this. Business data protection, regulation. Karim, regulation has kind of a double-edged sword, isn't it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially when we come, I mean, there are many different regulations, you know, what are the norms for someone to be verified on the identity, to be able to do qualified electronic signatures. There's, but there is also data protection. In Europe, we have GDPR. In Switzerland, we don't, but very similar. Right? On the one hand, it's really good. But if you look at AI and the developments there, obviously, I mean, you can build a lot, but you need data. You need data to advance from a technological perspective. The more protected the data is, the less we, as technology or researchers, the less access we have to that. Like, basically, we're losing the AI race in Europe because it's partially also overprotected. And we don't have, let's say, the necessary level of flexibility while maintaining the privacy.
So how do you strike that balance? What do you do? What do you think?
Well, we don't. There is an imbalance, right? China is leading, US is leading, on the one hand with the data that they have and can use for further advancing technologies, but also the capitalization of the companies.
Right, right. Okay,
Right.
so what you think is maybe some of the regulations could be loosened without turning everything into the Wild West?
Yes, or there need to be like more structured frameworks on how can we use data, how can we use it ethically as well. It's also a very important topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel.
I mean, this agency imbalance that you just kind of alluded to, these wallets will allow us to be or execute agency in the digital world. We talk about identity, not accounts.
Right.
And that is super crucial to understand what that impact is in the transaction or transactions and interactions that we actually have afterwards.
Right.
So with the use of those identities and also other digital proofs that can be issued on the trust infrastructure. I think when we talk about AI, then the aspects of misinformation, disinformation, etc., are absolutely crucial because we are in an information crisis, as we all can feel. With our children, we can feel it in day-to-day consumption of information.
Yeah.
We can feel it everywhere. So what are the fundamental aspects that we can infuse into these digital ecosystems?
Yeah.
And that's where identity is one, but there needs to be regulation also in regard to structurally have a strategy of how identity can create value in context with the AI information crisis that we are in. And so, for example, how do we ensure that in the town square applications we don't have as many bots as we have today that actually shape public opinion? And that's one of the aspects that we need to consider more systematically and find solutions more
It's also a matter of sensitizing the public, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on trust.
Maybe just one thing. So we also need to extend the frameworks that we apply for digital identity of individual people also to machines. Right? Now we have the rise of agentic AI. I build my 10 AI bots that execute stuff for me. How does the counterparty know that they actually represent me and not someone else?
Yeah.
Right? Just to spread
Same
even more
for
panic.
businesses.
Yeah, exactly. You got me even more worried now. Yeah. Agnieszka, on the regulatory compliance, do you think it's too tough? I mean, on the European level, there's a Digital Services Act,
Yes.
Digital Markets Act, General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR.
There's a lot of regulation. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And I hear this because I do a fair amount of activity in the European Parliament, and I hear some who say, well, it's just too tight. It's a straitjacket.
Yes and no. I think this is a testing moment. So because these are new technologies, so as we said, these things are being created. I mean, technology is advancing, so I think regulation is trying to catch up. So look, from the business point of view, obviously there needs to be, as I mentioned earlier, the necessary safeguards, because we need to operate as a compliant operator. So regulation is good in general, but I think Karim mentioned, I mean, there needs to be a balance, and imbalance definitely does not help. And probably we are going to talk about it later, but we need to think about the digital transformation and how much this regulatory imbalance is supporting that or actually being an obstacle. And I think this is one of the key questions.
Okay, good. Daniel, by the way, you worked 30 years in tech and business for IBM, Mahindra, and others, so you're very well versed in what companies face as far as regulation. You're also a skydiving champion, which is very interesting. Taking the plunge.
How did you find that out?
So you somehow, well, I have my ways. And you, because of that, I guess you, when you do skydive, you must have in mind the risks that you take and the precautions. How can we use that as a metaphor for privacy by design, so that people are willing to take the plunge on digital IDs, knowing that there is privacy by design?
So obviously, as a skydiver, you have to have a plan B. Always. That's the first thing. And I think the risk-based approach that you can apply to regulation is one of the core elements. And I think Switzerland has a great history of creating very flexible regulatory frameworks. And I think that's also the case with the EID framework that they put in place now.
Okay.
It really creates a solid fundament that allows for continuous evolution, which is super important. As we can see, technology evolves, society evolves, businesses evolve. What are the fundamental aspects that we need to secure to have a solid starting point and evolve from there? And I think the public vote should be on the starting point, and it should not be on a perfect system. So there are voices out there that really are pushing for extreme arguments and narratives, and I think what we need to find is a solid foundation on which we can further evolve, and through direct democracy, that's also ensured that public has a say.
Indeed.
As long as the direct democracy is not hijacked by disinformation, right?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
a risk.
first of all, yes, is certainly an important aspect. But when you look at how democracy works in Switzerland, you have a direct democracy. Obviously, the referendum was called.
Yep.
Now we are working up to the public vote in 28th of September.
Yes.
And for me, the dialogue cannot be open enough during that time, and we need to hear all sides.
Yeah, that's what this is
That's
about.
what we are doing.
Yes, exactly, yeah. Let me then move to part 3 about trust. and consumer digital literacy, the responsibility of business and government in doing this. How do we also avoid exclusion? How do we do this? Daniel, there's good and bad friction, you've told me. There's a bad in that some people are excluded in some ways, but good in the sense that there is privacy and trust that is developed, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the aspects that definitely needs to be discussed, especially there is critics in regard to how do you do digital onboarding to the Swiss CID, and we need to be as transparent as possible in this regard.
Right.
And I think on the other side, we need to protect the IP of making sure that this is safe and secure as strong as possible. So this balance is super important, and when we talk about good and bad friction, I think we always need to assure that showing up in some cases is really important. Mm-hmm. In some other cases, it really is too expensive, and there need to be compromises. So I think those are the aspects that are crucially important to balance. And then when there are other countries where citizens are living in very rural areas, and there is a lot of fraud in regard to, are my relatives still alive? Do I get my social payments from the state, even though they are dead since years? So that, going to an office is some kind of a strong and good friction that we need to keep in some aspects.
Okay.
In other aspects, we absolutely need to experiment to improve the mechanisms of driving digitization forward in those key areas where technology can really help to can bridge between the positive sides of good friction and the negative sides.
of Agnieszka, on consumer trust,
Yes.
how do we fight ID fraud? How do we do that to
Well,
build
actually,
trust?
EID can help us a lot with that, as long as this is a robust system. And obviously, for the consumer, it also brings a lot of trust and confidence if they know that we operate on a robust system. And I think it also helps, more from the ethical, I would say, point of view, normalize the fact that the age needs to be verified because we sell certain products which are addressed only to adult consumers. So I see a lot of benefits also from the educational point of view, but obviously consumer trust is extremely important. And I think, all the doubt that is coming, I think is very legitimate. And I think we need to take it very seriously. And we need to address it in a proper way, listening to what people in the referendum are raising.
Sure. Karim, what about this concept of self-sovereign, having control over your own data? There's only a certain extent that goes, but doesn't that help to build trust in the system?
Absolutely. When it comes to trust, when you start educating the people, the more you give them the feeling that they are under control of their data, and the more trust you can build, basically. So the EID was built with self-sovereignty as a philosophy, which is great. But obviously, it's still state-controlled because they are the ones issuing your identity. So also there, you have a certain balance. And if you want to go completely self-sovereign, you need to build it completely decentralized, which is also great from an idea perspective, but it's not practical. If you actively ask people whether they value their privacy and information, they say yes, absolutely, sure, and they will go and vote, for that idea. But in reality, after they go and vote, they go back, take a selfie, and upload it everywhere on social media, right? So it's very contradicting in that sense. So we live in a country which is great, where the people trust the government. So we are in a really good position for that, I guess. So I think we have the trust already. But the moment where this trust comes at the cost of convenience,
Right.
the users, or the general public, will choose convenience.
Yeah.
So if we want to achieve adoption, we need to have a really good trade-off between this privacy and trust and the convenience.
It's also a matter of digital literacy, right? What's the role of government, of business in encouraging more digital literacy, which also brings trust, right, Daniel?
Absolutely, and also of media. I mean, there are wonderful projects out there, for example, to counteract on misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes, etc. Looking at C2PA, the Content Authenticity Initiative, and some of these aspects on how consumers really can verify. And for me, that's a fundament. You know, when you go to the digital realm, applying a mistrust first kind of mindset to the information that you consume online is super important in these days. And then when there are mechanisms in place that allow you to verify certain pieces of information, whether it's a picture, whether it's the content of a video, whether it's even the provenance of that information, how it was altered over time, I think C2PA and content authenticity is really one of those examples on how we could push for consumer understanding of the importance of verification, because it allows for super simple verification of where this picture was taken, what that picture actually looked like when it was taken, and how it was altered, and then, you know, what at the end you consume, and that transparency creates trust.
Okay.
That transparent. So it's a mixture of how do you employ technology and governance to, at the end, create trusted systems that allow you to verify certain pieces of information according to a framework that.
Okay, so that's more like on the government level, right? On the regulatory level.
Not only.
Or what? Because,
not only. I think governance is important for businesses as well.
Yeah, yeah. Can you talk more about that? Right, Agnieszka, maybe in the role that business plays in digital literacy.
Well, I think, like as we said, I mean, the fact that we are sitting here, I think this is part of the educational effort, absolutely. So for us, it's important that all our customers and clients and consumers, they understand the importance and they understand what are the mechanisms behind identification of certain information, how much information they share, why it is used, for which purposes, etc. So I think this transparency that Daniel also mentioned is very important, because I think then you talk about like very objective grounds, why do you need to collect this information. But I just wanted to add one thing to the discussion, because we are talking a lot about the benefits, but I think we also need to talk about what is the potential cost of rejection.
Yes, right.
And what is the lost opportunity, because we are talking about one element, but of the very big ecosystem. I mean, like identification is related to e-banking, e-voting, all the e-government services. So how much this will influence, I mean, the country lagging behind development of the technology. And I think this is part of the discussion that should be taking place. Yeah. And sorry if I'm advancing some of the points you are mentioning, but I think it's quite important element, which is more forward-looking. So it's less maybe focused today on what we have here and now, but more in which direction we go. And to which extent this is the convenience, but also development of the economy and the society.
What about on the business side? Because you do, Karim, you consult businesses. You tell them how to develop digital onboarding by the public.
Yeah.
How do you advise them on getting the public to accept, or their customers to accept, that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, we provide the solutions, the technology for onboarding. EID is a part of it, right? Again, so basically you have different ways of how you can identify yourself towards a business, right? EID will be then the preferred one because it's supposed to be the easiest and the most secure one. But we have other technologies then as fallback, because we will not have 100% adoption, right? EID is not mandatory. We'll always have people who don't want an EID or can't have an EID, and they need to either go through our technologies or go somewhere in person if available. I think important for businesses is not only just to have a solution in place, but they also have a certain responsibility. Yeah. Right. If we talk about exclusion of people, right? Again, EID is not mandatory. Yeah. But if Philip Morris decides, no, I always want to collect all the information of the user in order to ship the product, right? What's the point, right? You don't need more than the age, not even the birth date, just the age. But you could decide for yourself, I always ask for everything or nothing, right? You either give me all your information or you don't. And this is where the businesses have a certain responsibility to also go in the right direction.
Correct.
Right?
And to inform their consumers, right?
Yes.
Their
Absolutely.
customers
Yes.
about
Yes.
how this is being used.
Yes, indeed.
The data,
Yes.
how the data is being
It's a
used. right,
conscious
Daniel?
choice
Yeah.
for ethical
Yes.
business and
Exactly.
for responsible business. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Right, and then also I think it's never too early, right? I mean, education. I have two kids that were in high school and they were getting that info. They had classes talking about that, about how about privacy and the risks of being online, the benefits, but the
Yes.
risks at the same time too.
Absolutely.
Right. What about getting businesses that are there some? Do you work with some businesses that are reluctant to get involved in digital IDs, and how do you encourage them to?
Well, again,
use it?
digital ID in that context is a big world. Everyone is involved with digital ID because your email password is digital ID, right? If we talk about really just verified identities, then everyone is reluctant, or almost everyone is reluctant who doesn't have to, right? Because it's an
Because it costs
addition.
money. It costs money to set that up. Right?
It costs money.
Yeah.
It kills conversion also, right? I mean, it's a step more in the process of onboarding a customer. It's just something people have to do and they don't like or they don't want to do. So if you don't need to, you don't have to. We have other customers, like platforms where you can book your babysitter or pet sitter and so on.
That's different.
They don't have to, but they want. They want to provide
Sure.
more trust for the platform. So also optionally, they let the users verify their identities, and so they increase the chance of being booked because that someone real is going to come to your doorstep.
It's digital
right?
to start with, but what about
Exactly.
some of these like small and medium enterprises, family run? Things have worked fine. We've had customers. We have regular customers. Why should we mess with this identification, digital identification?
Well, it's supposed to save cost, right? Make it easier. Again,
In
so
the long run.
if you have, I mean, basically it replaces a login, right? As well, you don't need to deal with passwords, recovery, and so on. I mean, it can be used for that, right? Again, where you don't need the verified identities, which is in most cases. We have cases in financial services, banking, credit cards, age verification, mobility payments, and so on, where you really need to know who is the person behind that. But with the EID, it will go much broader because then comes, I need to know what is your degree. I don't even need to know who you really are, but I need to know, is the degree from ETH that you claim really there? Do you really have that?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And this is where it provides just much more trust. You don't have a reputation risk if you don't do it. It saves cost because you don't have to run after references and make calls to see if it is really true.
I think EID can be seen as a trust anchor, as the first trust anchor on a more broader trust infrastructure that will allow the exchange of verifiable data.
Right.
And when we think about that, we can think about all of the processes within business, within government, within B2B, B2C, and various other business models that will benefit from the trust infrastructure that is being brought to the table by the Swiss government. And I think the fundamental understanding of what digital public infrastructure is needs to be created within businesses, within governments, but also within individuals, because typically governments have been seen as burden, regulatory. Now they become an enabler of things that no one would invest in by themselves. So they need to build that foundation so we can bring that good way of life in Switzerland into the digital world with the values that are actually dear to us. I see it that way.
So it becomes a platform to build innovation on top.
Yes.
Right?
Right. It's a balance.
I'm a bit allergic against platforms because it always means, corporate capture and closed systems.
Not software platform, just
I agree.
Platform in
the technologists. The technologists have spoken.
Can we talk a little bit more about cybersecurity, though? I mean, because that has a lot to do with trust. And me, I as a consumer, every couple of weeks there is some kind of hack, and I'm told to change my password or something like that, or get my credit cards out of there. That undermines trust, doesn't it? And so how do you fight that aspect? The two techies here.
So I think governance is again the answer, because you think about principles, policies, and practices.
Yeah.
And within the practices, I think what you need to be super aware of is, what do you go through to secure these systems? And how do you build these systems so by design they embed what the principles actually demand you to do? Because those are kind of the guiding principles that accompany you on a multi-year journey on which you need to stay on track principle-wise, but there is so much change outside of this program that you need to consider, so these principles guide you and the practices make it secure over time.
Okay, and then from a technical side, Karim, I mean, how do you think businesses are investing enough in cybersecurity, seeing that there are so many hacks happening?
Some do, some don't. But the thing is, nothing is unhackable, and the question is, what is the risk that you're taking? What is the potential damage? Do you invest this last 10% to reduce that risk?
Right.
But I think the EID is a good thing there, because why do hacks or cyber attacks happen? Because there's something to get, right?
Yeah,
companies have huge data lakes, and data silos of all the information that they collect, although they don't necessarily need it. With the EID, the information is on your own device, and you only share it for that purpose at that point.
Yeah.
Sure, I mean, this is at least the idea. There will still be a lot of data, but in that context, it reduces the need of keeping your own databases and data lakes and so on forever, which are basically a target.
I have to say that the digital ID that I use in Belgium has never been hacked that I know of. It seems to be airtight, watertight. It's more like from websites or of companies, right? So, I mean, Daniel, do you have full confidence in a digital ID, or is that also, anything is possible, right?
Digital systems are never 100% waterproof. Never. Yeah. There will always also be the human factor that is involved. But I think there is an opportunity to build a more resilient system moving forward. Yeah, because the internet was never built with trust and identities and security in mind.
It's a highway.
It was built as a knowledge exchange platform.
Right.
So the transactions that businesses and our entire society wants the internet to cover require a fundamental rethink on how the internet foundations are being done.
The infrastructure, the digital infrastructure.
The foundations of the internet. Thinking about identity was never thought as being part of the internet. Nobody knows. There's this famous cartoon, in the internet, nobody knows I'm a dog, and that really applies. So how do you ensure a more trusted foundation for the internet moving forward?
Right.
And I think digital identity is one of the most abstract building blocks of doing that. So yes, there is outdated fundamental infrastructure, and we need to think about it, how to systematically change it, because companies like PMI, they invest millions and millions every year, increasing by 50% or even more in security practices and remediations. Right. How do we move into a more sustainable model for security? And that's, I think, where some of these frameworks will create a lot of value.
We have any questions out in the audience? Somebody would like to ask a question? You must have a burning question. Well, in any case, let's continue on that track. But feel free. Oh yes, I have a question over here. Okay, please.
About the interoperability to international systems. I'd be curious, how is it going to work with the European solution that's currently out there, the Swiss solution?
Interoperability between the Swiss and the EU, or that's a good question. Which one of you guys would like to take that?
So Switzerland has taken deliberate choices of simplifying the overall architecture that is being deployed as part of the EID fundament. And Karim alluded to it, and it's much simpler to what actually is coming to life in EIDAS 2 in the European Union. And it removes some parts of the friction of the operational burden to efficiently maintain the system as well. But it's still a complex system. So with this, when we look at the interoperability framework, there's obviously semantic interoperability that is important. So how do the data packets fit together?
Yeah.
Then there is legal interoperability. What do we agree between Germany and Switzerland? Will international organizations play a role in those agreements? So there will need to be Staatsverträge, state contracts, state contracts between, so to ensure legal interoperability. And then there is the aspects of organizational interoperability, so which role, what to play in the ecosystem. And there will also be the technological interoperability. And all of these aspects need to be right to ensure acceptance of the Swiss ID in foreign countries.
And what's the difference between the two? Is it simply technical, or what? Is it a question of also privacy, or Karim?
There might be.
Yeah.
I mean, there are quite a few differences on a technological level, but also on the concept. In the EU, for example, everyone can do a wallet based on the infrastructure. In Switzerland, the wallet is more or less restricted to the one by the government for your core identity.
As a first step.
As a first step, again. Also, question. I mean, it's not all the standards are fully defined yet for EU, right? There may come still changes. It's still questionable whether it will actually come 2027. So Switzerland took a decision. Okay, we go ahead. We start. This is how we do it. We started simple, and from there we obviously can extend over time.
And collaboration is the key to this. And there will be a conference in Geneva early in July that actually fosters or pushes this international collaboration more between the intergovernmental organizations, the governmental organizations, some of the private sector players. So a big conference is going to come together, which is not owned by one convener, but Switzerland actually helps it to come to life in the good spirit of international collaboration, and that's where we will be hopefully coming to conclusions, or at least define next steps on, the stakeholder basis is so broad. How do we ensure interoperability and future development with those devices that we all carry with us every day? How do we ensure that we can use these systems in secure and private ways while using these devices that are manufactured by global players? So I think those type of conversations are super important, not only private sector.
And is there, what about, I mean, other third countries? Is that a possibility between Europe and, say, the US or Japan, or to have a common ID?
Ultimately, we use.
EU.
Let's start with the EU. Okay, don't want to complicate things at the moment. Let's take a question over here.
I have another question regarding the adoption. I think we can all agree on that adoption is key and everything. But what do you think that the government or the public sector needs to do to drive this adoption in the population?
Okay, anyone? Who goes?
Look, I can just mention, I think adoption, as we discussed, education is critical. And I think, demonstrating various benefits, but also what I mentioned earlier, the cost of rejection and what does it mean for the country, and for if we don't adopt certain solutions, what does it mean for the country to be lagging behind? And I think the fact that the different stakeholders take part in it, because then you demonstrate the full picture. So it's not only one selected area of the solution, but really like the full scope of the benefit and the ecosystem.
That without it, it makes life more difficult for individuals, I guess, but also for businesses.
For business as well, exactly. So
slowed
big
down
business, small
by
business,
that.
as we discussed. So
Right. Daniel?
And I think it's about, it's like a toothbrush. It needs, we want to use it every day because it creates value and it's simple to use. That's how wallets need to be in the future. They need to create value in day-to-day interactions. And just a couple of those examples should be covered by use cases that, drive. And EU has taken a deliberate choice in regard to e-signatures being part of the UDI wallet ecosystems. Also payments being part of the EU wallet ecosystem. And those are drivers for adoption because they create value every day.
Yeah.
So Switzerland is different,
Yeah.
but they have taken good first steps in actually connecting to the digital signature provider, trust service providers in Switzerland, so you can seamlessly actually drive a signature process with your EID to wherever you are getting your digital signature from. Is it Swiss Post or Swiss Sign or Swisscom or
Right.
exactly? Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you
I mean,
wanna
at the end of the day, I think it's about awareness, accessibility, and convenience.
Absolutely.
Right? People need to know about it. People need to see it everywhere when
Yeah.
I log in or want to open a bank account, get a mobile subscription, order something online. So the organizations, they just need to implement it, right? So it's the
Yeah.
accessibility, and then it needs to be convenient. It needs to be a value add for the end user at the end of the day. It needs to be
Yeah.
easier than doing it differently.
But they also need to have that trust, that level of trust in the system. But one thing that interests me is this referendum. It came about because there was a campaign, a signature campaign, and the signature campaign was support the No EID campaign is an assemblage of parties on the left and the right, and pirate or ex-pirates and very arch conservative.
drama,
How do
yeah.
you dispel, or how do you take on that kind of critique between now and September?
Open dialogue,
Yeah.
Transparency.
transparency. Yeah.
Yes, sharing information, giving examples from other countries. I think, evidence-based discussion. I think that's the best you can do.
Yeah. I think we have another question over here. Did we? Yes? No? Oh, okay. No? Another? Yes?
So, exactly the same question as before in regards to adoption.
Can you hold the mic a little bit closer?
In regards to adoption, there's a sort of a killer use case that will drive it. It's got to be convenient and help efficiency. People need to want it. However, that's adoption. I've lived through a similar experience in an Asian country where they've used this. And the experience there was initially it was not mandated, but was just encouraged and made life easier. There is no need, I would say, what happens if it fails, really, is the question. If the vote fails in September, is there any need to consider that as a rejection or a blocker? I would suggest not. If the infrastructure and the use cases are put in place with businesses and made available, people will self-adopt if it's sufficient enough. So is that the idea anyway? Are we actually discussing something around a vote which is actually not that critical? Make it available, people will come.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Who would like to take that on? That's interesting.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. We need to make it adoptable by creating value. And what you described, Singapore has, for example, has been driving a lot of that convenience, but they have not had that need to balance it very strongly with the privacy aspects. So the balance that we have to strike here in Switzerland, based on the values and the principles that we want to see in digital systems moving forward, kind of creates a more complexity. Nevertheless, I agree with you, but we talk too much about the EID itself. We talk too little about the use cases that would allow for this large-scale adoption. So think about claims processes, for example. When we would issue every ticket that we get from buying a product as a verifiable credential, which the EID also is, which also can be issued on the trust infrastructure in Switzerland, retailers could agree on issuing all of these receipts in digital credential formats, and they could help, for example, the claims processes of insurers and other consumer claims for, warranties, etc., to be managed much more simple. That is just one of the examples where the private sector could actually be creative and think about solutions that solve large-scale problems, or even if they are small, But I see the problem every day. I lose all of these receipts, they are gone. What do I do? My product is broken, how do I get a new one? So that solves a problem, and I can use it every day.
Right. Got a question here?
Also the question of there's a lot of technology, but for businesses, there's also the question of the tech, but going where the consumer wants to go. How do you balance those two, let's say, those 2 points? Which becomes the most important, and at what point?
Okay, would you like to answer that? Yeah.
Look, I
Agnieszka?
think we need to follow, I mean, we need to be consumer-centric. Yeah? So we need to also follow the consumer and see how he behaves in the whole ecosystem, what kind of services they need, I mean, the efficiency is needed for the consumer. So I think what we're just discussing, the solutions, they help to facilitate the whole ecosystem around the consumer. So I think this is very, very important element of the discussion. And obviously there is always like the need for the policymakers as well to support us in shaping the framework, the baseline,
Right.
so that we have this trust and credibility of the solutions. But then it needs to also, I mean, allow for the evolution and following the consumer and customer.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, with adoption, as usual, it's chicken, egg, right? You need to have the good use cases, which are driven by the businesses, and then you need to have the consumers, and the businesses only want if enough consumers want, and so on. So this is why you pretty much need to do it all at once, right? I mean, but this is why also we start with the core identification, right? With your core credentials, which also on your ID, so all the use cases, like age verification, or everyone who uses our solutions for identity verification, basically they get it for free. It's just like another document, right? It's like, do you have your passport to identify yourself? Do you have your ID, your driver's license, or your EID? It's like with this, you just improve the conversion. Right? So it needs to have a certain benefit for the businesses. It makes processes more efficient. They can save cost. Where it becomes more complex is if you're a multinational company and then you want to support the Swiss EID, you want to support all the different EU ones, which they will be different for each country, right? Although the same infrastructure. This is where the complexity comes in, but also brings opportunities, obviously, for organizations like DDoS, like us, like who can help shed a little bit light into that complexity.
Daniel, one of your talking points that I got from you before was the Swiss difference. Switzerland has a real opportunity to lead?
I think so.
How?
Well, when we think about so let's say the public vote goes through. Currently, when we think about identities for natural people, this is one of the aspects that solves one aspect of the fundamental problem. Karim, you alluded to identities for machines and identities for organizations. How do we create a more comprehensive trust network? I think is one of the opportunities.
Yeah.
And that to simplify the management of compliance in regard to data. Also in regard to systematically addressing fraud. I think beyond silos, beyond just Switzerland. And when we look at what Switzerland now builds is a completely open infrastructure. It's open source. It's participatorily developed. And it can be adopted by anyone, globally as well.
So you think the EU should adopt that?
Well, no. Look, I think EU is far in their process.
Yeah.
And the approach that they have chosen represents what they want to see and what their principles are, what their values are, how they designed the system on the multiple levels. That's their choice.
Okay.
Absolutely, we need to create bridges between all of these ecosystems or networks. And I think that's the opportunity for Switzerland, because when we think back, Switzerland has been a service provider to the world since hundreds of years.
Yes.
And I think it stands credibly for trust. So whenever we have the opportunity to infuse trust into something like the web in more systematic ways, there are many, many opportunities.
Can it also be sort of a model for smaller countries that think, oh, if I join this digital ID thing, I'm going to get gobbled up by some big blob? You have your system that that works for a small country, right? And that could be connected elsewhere, right?
Could be one of the opportunities. What I'm saying is digital trust as a whole needs to become more prevalent in our political and in our economic conversations. And it needs to be on the agenda of every company, like you had taken a very deliberate choice. Trust is one of the core aspects that will be the fundament of how the future works moving forward, I hope at least.
Yeah.
And that's where we can create value.
Okay, we got the last few minutes. I'd like to have kind of a round among you, looking 5 years down the line, maybe even 10. Where do you see digital IDs in the next 5, even 10 years? Karin?
Don't know where to see it. I can say what I hope, but I hope we can trust the information that we see in the digital world without, worrying. Again, there has been, I mean, you said it before, but there is a shift in the mindset. Before I used to Google something. If I want to know something, I get 10 different results and I can choose which one works for me and which one I want to trust. Right now, if I search for information and Google something or ChatGPT something, I get one answer and I need to trust that this is the correct one, but I can't, right? And I want to get into a state where we can trust again the information, or at least have the transparency about the information that we see online.
Okay, Agnieszka?
So in 5 years, you said?
Let's say in 5 years.
I hope we'll have the same discussion, but the stage will be completely different. So I hope we'll be discussing the implementation phase. What are the practical learnings? What needs to be improved? But the system is in place and it's working.
That it's, if it's accepted by the Swiss voters, right?
That's what I hope so.
That's right.
I think the first step is really the vote, and we need to focus on informing the public in meaningful ways and transparent ways. We need to get over that hurdle because that fortress that I mentioned before is critically important. It's one of the last fortresses that we can build for ourselves. And it's so critical that we do it now because otherwise, there will be players, monopolies that will take this role. They will not wait taking this role. So we have to build something that allows us to still stay in control. And that is the fundament for everything that will be coming in the next
there's only
years.
so much we know right now, and there are all these crazy predictions about our artificial intelligence. Is there any way to predict how things could look as far as digital IDs and the influence of AI?
Let's ask the AI to predict.
Oh my God, I'm not sure. I mean, that's a whole...
it's a wild card, right? And how do you... Is that a factor for people who are going to vote in September, thinking, anything could happen? I'm going to lose control over my data. I want to keep my little plastic card. Sorry about that. What do you think?
I mean, you mentioned e-collecting before. You mentioned e-voting. I think we're not there with e-voting. There are so many different factors that need to be taken into account.
Yeah.
E-collecting, so collecting signatures for political initiatives like the referendum against the EID.
Yeah.
I think is also a multi-level conversation. You need to look at what are the impacts because you fundamentally change the economics of the e-voting, e-collecting, because you can collect 50,000 signatures within half a day if you go the right channel.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for the dynamics of the
Swiss
democratic processes? And I think that's where there needs to be research really closely aligned with execution or pilots that can allow us to learn on moving forward.
Yeah.
And the learning aspect and how we measure that improvement and how we measure those aspects really need to be closely aligned with what the educational sector brings to the table, what civil society brings to the table, what is important for the businesses and what is important for the state. And I think we can only do it in constant dialogue and collaboration.
And on the business side, I mean, dealing with that unpredictable aspect of AI when it comes to IDs?
Look, we are looking into AI and we are looking into the benefits AI can bring, and there are a lot, obviously. And we're also looking at the safeguards. So what do we need to put in place to protect ourselves from unintended consequences? But it's evolving. So obviously more research is needed, expertise is needed.
Yeah.
So we are trying to acquire that because we also want to innovate in various aspects of our business operations.
Yeah, and that innovation, safeguards,
Yeah.
that's what you were working on too with
Absolutely.
companies, right?
So basically, I mean, we're using AI to fight AI again. But, I mean, the technological approach is just one. There need to be other safeguards on political level, on governance level, on ethical level, on organizations as well. But there will always be, bad actor which want to exploit the status quo and develop new methods to exploit more. And it's a cat and mouse game at the end of the day. It's not the first time the world transforms.
Yeah.
We had a few revolutions in the past, and somehow we coped. So we will cope again.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
That's
think
right.
also personhood so proving personhood in the digital world in super privacy preserving ways without any traces, I think is one of the aspects that we can infuse in the next years as well on the basis of digital ID, but fully privacy preserving. That means that we eradicate the ability to not know whether there's a human or a robot on the other side. And there are too many robots in the town squares today. So that's one of the practical next steps we can take to create a better future.
Right, right. I think that does it. Anybody else have anything to add there? I think we're good. I'd like to thank everyone for being connected, all of you who are online as well as the audience. Thanks for your questions. Thanks for the team's work in organizing all of this. This is great. Very unpredictable what's going to happen, but knowing that there are many people who are working on safeguards and trying to keep IDs human as well. The human factor and human empowerment is very much a part of that, and that's what's going to, I think, persuade people to accept digital IDs as making their lives easier in business and work and play. I think that does it for this Euronews debate. I'd like to thank you for watching here in Zurich, and we look forward to the next time. Thanks for watching. See you next time.